Welcome to Bookworthy Podcast, where we talk about kidlit that's good for kids' hearts and souls. Kidlit ranges from birth to teens, so we have a lot of shelf space to cover. If you've followed Bookworthy for a short time or a long time, welcome. This week might sound familiar because we're on break preparing for the next season. But don't worry, we'll be doing some Play It Again episodes in the meantime to continue discovering great books together. New episodes will be coming soon. Happy reading. Welcome to Bookworthy. Today we're talking with Rachael Hartzell, the author of picture book The Garden Scouts, Buzzing with Love, which is the first book in her Garden Scouts series. The Garden Scouts Buzzing with Love follows Kiki the Fly and Rhino the Beetle in a heartwarming adventure of friendship and love crafted for Christian families. Welcome to Bookworthy, Rachael.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
It is a pleasure. I love your little book, and I'm a nature lover, so I kind of love that you're in a garden with bugs and all that kind of things. But I thought we'd start with finding out what your favorite bug is.
So the first thing that pops in my mind is anything that shows like immense creativity from God. So like the intricacies that he can put in such minute little packages. Even if you think about like a roly-poly, how tiny each of those little sections are and how each part of it is purposely made for what it needs to do and to protect itself. Like it's those kinds of things are really cool to me. So the more complex and even colorful it can be, the more fascinating I find it. But one of my more recent ones that probably I've been really just blown away by are the ones that I find in the garden that are the beneficial ones, like the protectors. So like it doesn't look probably cute to most people, but like the wheel bug where it has like this raised little bag, it looks prehistoric. It's so cool to see right now. I know I'm like nerding out. But it's just those cool little details. It's there to protect the plants because it eats the things that destroy them. And it looks kind of terrifying. I'm not going to lie, but it's just so cool to see how something that looks dark and bad actually brings a lot of great protection to the garden. I don't know. Those kinds of things I find really, really cool and interesting when looking at bugs and researching them. And, but something like that isn't going to be as cute in a kid's book.
I'll have to look up a picture of a wheel bug. I don't think that's not coming to my mind. So it sounds like an interesting
adventure. I never saw
adventure.
one as a kid. So it's been something that I've discovered as an adult.
I love what bugs bring. That's just a reminder that God is a God of details, like the smallest details. What is it?
Right.
It's a common answer, but the bumblebee, like their wings are actually physically should not be able to carry them because of their size, but because of how fast they move them and because of God's design, they can carry their large body from flower to flower and do the job that they've been given. So I kind of love those fun, odd little details. Do you have a very interesting bug encounter you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
Oh, goodness. Because my daughter's obsessed with bugs, we get a lot of bug encounters. One of them that sticks out the most, though, was actually this last end of summer, this last year. And all summer long, she's not like afraid of pretty much anything out there. So she wants to handle it all. Bumblebee, she doesn't care. Like we constantly warn her, they're going to sting you. They're going to sting you. And, then they sting her and then she keeps doing it. Like she knows not to handle, like the poisonous things, but if they aren't poisonous and she hasn't had a reaction, she keeps handling them. We're still working on it. But so she's out there. I don't know if you know what skippers are. It's like the really teeny tiny butterflies that look like they just fly really fast. They're called skippers. And so she's hand capturing these skippers in our garden to hand feed the garden spiders. We call them zipper spiders, the ones that have like that zigzag zipper in the center. Okay, black and yellow, and it's the only spider that I'm not terrified of. Maybe that and jumping spiders. Jumping spiders are actually kind of cute. If you get up close and like look at them, they're really cute. But every other spider I'm not a fan of. But she was hand capturing these and hand feeding the spiders all summer long. And like we found them as little adolescent spiders in the garden. And we had about 3 of them, I think. And so she's feeding them all summer long, watching them grow and everything. And one day she comes in and she's like, Mom, God spoke to me. And I was like, okay, that's awesome. What do you mean? Can you explain that to me? And she was telling me how when she, in that moment, I mean, she's been doing it all summer. In that moment, she was hand feeding the spider and she realized how his web was like a web of lies or a web of sin. And they were getting caught in that and devoured. I mean, you know, they were killed because of the sin, and how that she was like relating it to, and this was before she accepted Jesus as her savior. So she's like having these lessons that she's learning in the garden from her passion with these insects. And well, technically a spider isn't an insect, but
potato, yeah.
Yeah, potato, yeah. But that was so cool to see how she had this passion and God spoke to her through that and was teaching her in that moment about what happens when we live a life of sin. And, you know, we're going to get caught in it and we're going to not have a very pretty ending, to be honest.
Yes, my boys love talking about that process, the icky part of the process. And I'm like, okay, why are we focused on this part of it? Can we focus on how cool this is and how God provides, and not the disintegration of bug parts?
Right.
That is a really sweet encounter. I love how God reaches out to us through nature and speaks to our hearts wherever we are, whether it's in the garden or in a book, and, you know, serving other people. God is just wanting to reach out to us and to seek us out where we find our interests. Now, I'll share a little bug story of mine. Mine is not as heartwarming and adorable as yours, but my kids, I have 3 boys, and they love Legos. And so it is not uncommon for me to find a Lego minifigure inside the laundry. So, you know, going and taking from the washer to the dryer, I find Legos all the time. So I see something in the bottom of my washing machine. I'm like, oh, it's just a Lego minifigure. And I pick it up, and it is a dead wolf spider.
Oh, no. Oh.
But it was like the size of a minifigure. And I was just like, okay. Did not expect that in my washing machine.
I would be putting on like thick winter gloves to do laundry, even in the summer from now on. That's too much.
It definitely makes me look at the minifigs a little different. Like, how many arms and legs do you have?
Yeah, right.
Because they can get very creative, but I'm just like, all right, that's enough. Yeah. Well, Rachel, I love that you've brought your daughter's love for, you know, the garden and bugs into your books and the Garden Scout series. Can you tell us a little bit about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. It started out where I was just trying to find some kind of resource that would explain better than I could, because I didn't quite understand all the fruit of the Spirit at the time, because I didn't grow up with a strong Christian education. So I was needing a resource that would explain beyond here, memorize what the names of all 9 are. I wanted something that dug deeper, because I saw that was a gap in the education from Christian resources and just the church in general. It's just, here's the verse, memorize it, or here's some other verses to memorize that are supposed to teach that. But for kids that are really young, that doesn't always click with them. And I wanted to reach kids, specifically my daughter initially, on a level that makes sense for them and that can really sink in. And that's stories. So I wanted to help my daughter initially, but now all kids, understand how to live out each fruit of the Spirit in a practical way in an everyday life situation. Granted, we're not bugs, but there's still situations involved in the stories that you can see are things that kids actually deal with. So in this story, we have this fly who just so desperately wants to have a friend, and she's having trouble because she has a little annoying quirk that she buzzes a lot, and not everybody likes to hear all the buzzing. And so she's been struggling to have friends. And then there's this really grumpy beetle who is coming to join this garden scout troop. They're the Bud Scouts, this level. It's patterned after typical scout systems like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. So there's different levels, and this is the Bud Scouts. And so these characters are meeting for the first time at the first scout meeting, but they struggle to get along because he's so grumpy. I guess he's the one more that's struggling to get along. He's really grumpy. She just desperately wants a friend, and she's trying to make it work. And so through it, there's a little allegory hint at how Jesus showed love to the unlovable, because really Rhino's kind of unlovable. And Kiki in her own right, because everybody finds her so annoying, and so it's hard to make a friend. And in the end, you have these two characters who are unlikely friends become friends and bond over a situation that happens. And that's, the start of the whole series from there, and I wanted to start with love, because love is literally the foundation of every other fruit in the fruit of the Spirit. You cannot have anything else if you don't base it in love. And there are so many facets of love beyond loving the unlovable, but I feel like that's one that kids struggle with a lot. And so I thought that would be a really poignant purpose for this book, to help them in that struggle.
I think it's really relatable because, Kiki the fly she wants to make friends with everybody. She's very bubbly. She's very hi, 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 hi. And then, Rhino is more like, I'm here. Kind of the Eeyore character.
Yeah, he is kind of that Eeyore character.
And we all love Eeyore. So it's one of those, we do encounter those people in our lives that are harder to connect with, that don't meet us at the same energy level, don't meet us at the same interest level in what we're doing. And I think Kiki and Rhino both do it, walk through the story and learn how to accept one another, accept their differences, as well as, care for one another, even though they're not the same type of bug, even though they look at the world differently or react to the world differently. And what is it? Rhino pretends to be dead, and Kiki flies away. And so they just learning how to, okay, what do I do with this? And I think kids, have been struggling over the last few years of how to have friendships and how to relate to one another. And I love how your book does a good job of walking into the struggles that friendships have for young kids and giving them ways to love when things don't seem easy. Because a lot of times we want to say, just love, love, love. But it's a choice. You have to choose it. And I love that your characters are walking through that struggle, because I think our kids really are having to face that in our day and age. And there are not a lot of resources out there to do that. So
yeah, I love what you said about it's not like, oh, love is just so wonderful all the time. You're right. It's messy. Mm-hmm. It's real love is messy, whether it's a friendship or a familial relationship. There's always going to be some kind of struggle going on in that relationship. And it's important to understand how to work through it and still foster that love in that relationship.
With three boys that are all very strong-willed, there's lots of what I call goat moments where they're ramming heads. And, they'll get separated, and we'll, go and talk to them, and they're like, why do I have this brother? And I'm like, God gave you this brother on purpose to teach you something. He's like, I don't want to learn this. As well, God does want you to learn this because you do need to learn to love through this hard thing. And so I love that, we can come to our kids like, love is not an easy thing. It's not, it is beautiful, but it does not always look beautiful. It's sometimes really hard. And, sometimes the people closest to us are the ones that push our buttons the most because they're the ones that installed them, right? So fun. Now, you have modeled this kind of garden world over kind of this garden scouts. Were you in scouting as a kid?
I actually was briefly. Yeah, I did about 2 or 3 years in Brownies. My mom was our scout leader for, I think, the first 2 years, and it was a lot of fun.
Very neat. Does your daughter do any scouting?
Not at the moment. We are contemplating maybe trying out some sort of situation like that. Not necessarily Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts right now. I think there's a new scouting system that I heard of recently that's like a Christian-based one. And so we were thinking about looking into our area and see if there's one around here, but she's not in one yet.
There definitely are a lot more options nowadays than there was when I know I was growing up, because it really was Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, and that was your choices.
Yeah, but they were also very different back then.
This is very true. I know. I have a kid. It's currently Scouts. It's not Boy Scouts anymore. It's Scouts. And so I have one kid in Scouts, and it has its positives and its drawbacks.
Yes.
To find that. Now, why did you choose a fly to be kind of the Kiki's representation in this story?
It seems really out in left field, I know. I wanted to pick something as a main character that's usually not seen as beautiful, and I wanted to make it appear beautiful to show that even those uglier, quote unquote, uglier parts in life can still have beauty in them. And so I specifically chose a green bottle fly to model the character after. So I wanted to kind of try to show like the iridescence that they actually have. From a distance, it just looks like this nasty black thing flying around. But when you really get up close, there's this beautiful green, bluish iridescence to them that is, I just think it's gorgeous. But they get a bad rap because of how annoying they are and the things they do when they land on our food, and I wanted to redeem it a little bit and show some beauty and give it some kind of redemption through the story and help people see bugs in a different light.
I love that because, I've seen some photographs of flies, their eyes like magnified, and it is breathtaking and just amazing that, we wouldn't normally see just how beautiful a glass bottle fly is, and, or even a beetle, and to be like, wow, God is really intentional about all of his creation, whether big or small. And I love that you're painting that detail inside of your story. Thank you. Talked about how love was the first of the fruits of the Spirit that you're walking through, and I think each of your books is going to be focused on one of these fruits of the Spirit and gaining some sort of pin. Like this book is the Love Strawberry pin, right?
Correct.
What is the possible next pin that could be highlighted in your next book?
Well, the next one would be the Joy Pineapple. We're going to go in order of how it's listed in Scripture. So next up is the Joy Pineapple.
Now, I love how you're kind of using, you kind of mentioned that there is this gap in communicating the fruits of the Spirit, and how we often, ask kids to memorize it and then assign fruits to these different qualities. What made you pick a love strawberry as your first pin?
Well, I actually have a lot of layers to this whole series. And it'll become more evident as I get more out and I will start making resources for it. But that is way far in the future and I'm not there yet. But just to kind of give you a little insider information, I have a different culture that is highlighted in every book. So like the next culture is going to have more of that Hawaiian type of culture in it. And so one of the most commonly recognized fruits for Hawaii is a pineapple. This first one, we have a character who is kind of like your Southern grandma kind of feel. And so strawberries feel very American to me. It feels like a very American fruit. I mean, I know they're everywhere across the world, but when you think of fruits in America, that's one of them that really, really pops in your mind first. And there's a fruit that is representative of the specific culture that will be highlighted in each book. So, apples also show up a lot in American culture, but it was very specific to a different culture, so it shows up later in the series.
Oh, sounds exciting. I love the attention to detail that you've put into your books.
I'm very focused on those little details. Those are very important to me.
Well, that's what makes a book appeal to such a wide age range, where a young kid, that's 3 or 4, could sit and enjoy the book and just enjoy the beautiful colors and all the different bugs. But someone who's on the upper echelon of your age range, to be like, they could really dig deep if they wanted to, and to take that time. So that's really a neat element of your book that you've put together. So,
thank you.
Did you always want to be an author, Rachael?
That's kind of a yes and no question. So when I was in elementary school, about 4th and 5th grade, I was starting to earn some writing awards. 5th grade specifically was this one where we wrote and illustrated, like, those books that have all the empty, clean pages in them, hard front and back on them, and you get to like write your story inside. So we did that in 5th grade and illustrated our books, and then they were submitted to a competition. And I was one of them from my school that was picked as a highlighted author to be showcased at this big event in a nearby really large town. And so there was a big author that came to speak, and everybody had their books on display for the whole crowd to go and read. And so that whole experience of like constantly being told your writing is good enough, better than the average kid coming in, so that made me think, what, maybe I can actually write and I could be an author when I grow up. And then 6th grade hit, and that was my first rejection. And I was crushed because I didn't win that year. And I just thought, what, I must not be good enough anymore. I'm done with it. And so I didn't write any more stories until 2022, 20 years later, when I picked my pencil up and started writing this January 1st. And
wow, that is quite the journey.
Yes. I was called back to it. God had other plans. And so here we are.
Well, but in the interim, you have been in education and a few other little, what do you call them, hats, I think, on your bio on your website. So what were you doing in those that 20-year span?
I decided to be an elementary education major, and I went through all of that, and that reawakened my love of children's literature, because as a kid growing up, it was kind of stolen from me. That might be too strong of a word, but the way that my public school was teaching reading actually made it feel like a chore, and it didn't feel like it was enjoyable anymore. So I didn't get to read I chose not to read a lot of the classic children's literature that I wish I could have read now as an adult. So when I went through my college education as an elementary major, we had a class that was all about children's literature. And that class is what reignited my love. And I became obsessed with picture books and chapter books for kids. And it was like, that was when I started my personal collection. And I've just not stopped having an obsession with how much you can learn from them and how relatable the characters are. And they kind of become like friends. And, you know, some of those families, it's like, oh, I feel like I'm a little fly on the wall, part of their family. And so that took me on a whole journey of just falling back in love with books. And I started teaching, and I did that for 3 years before I decided this is entirely too stressful for us wanting to start a family. I didn't want the stress on top of a pregnancy. And so I decided to quit. And during the year, in between quitting and having our daughter, I was tutoring one of my last students who had dyslexia, like really, really farly, I don't know how to word this, probably edit this part out for a second. So my student had dyslexia that was causing him to be really behind, and he needed a lot of help. And so his mom decided to homeschool him, and I was there to help tutor him for that year. And I found a program that was specifically designed for kids like him. And in that time that I was tutoring him for about 8 months, he went from barely being able to write a 5-word sentence to writing a 10-page story.
Wow.
That was the most impactful teaching I feel like I've ever done outside of being a mom. And I can't replicate that in a classroom setting, a traditional classroom setting. And so I knew that wasn't for me anymore. And so after having my daughter, I also decided, you know, I can't also split my time trying to tutor other kids and be a mom for her the way I want to. So I started homeschooling her from a young age in an age appropriate way. You know, you're still educating even a 2-year-old, whether you call it homeschooling or not, you know?
They're learning
So
whether you want them to or
yeah,
not.
yeah, you're going to learn whether you want to or not, or whether they want to or not. There's tricky little ways you can make it happen. So I've been doing that since then, and we picked up helping out at our church on Wednesday nights and teaching 4th and 5th graders through that program at our church. And that has been immensely fun to get to work with an older group of kids again. Because, you know, working with toddlers and stuff wasn't what I went to school for. So it was nice to get that that verbal exchange with those older kids. You know, it's a different type of conversation you get to have. So that's been fun.
What was it when I was pre-kids? Our Sunday school used to volunteer in our children's department at the church we were at, and we volunteered with 4-year-olds. And I was like, golly, if I could just pop out a 4-year-old that could have a conversation with me, I'd be happy. But God knew the way it's supposed to go. But it was just one of those, like, in my unknowing, I was just like, I just want a 4-year-old, please.
Right.
So there is something to do about that communication and that ability just to see into their world a little bit, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Rachel, what is the most impactful book in your life other than the Bible?
Oh, other than the Bible. So I would say probably 2. One for homeschooling. I was really having to think on this a lot last night, and I just could not pick one over the other. I feel like I had to categorize the impactful areas that I've had. So homeschooling, I feel like, would be Teaching from Rest by Sarah McKenzie, because I went from being a public school teacher and being taught this is how you teach, this is what it looks like. And then I went to homeschooling and I was like, why is this not working? why does not my kid not want to sit here and do the same things that the same strategies I was teaching with? It just was mind boggling to me. And then I read that book and I went, oh, I have to rewire my brain. I have to reevaluate what it is to be an educator at home. It's so different. And so I had to completely deconstruct what I knew about teaching. And that really helped me take the anxiety away and take the pressure away that I was putting on myself, which was being transferred into our homeschooling. And then as far as passion for books, I feel like that's another area that was really impactful with the book Babushka, Baba Yaga by Patricia Palacco.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first children's literature book that I picked up and created and taught a lesson from. And it just ignited that fire in my belly for a hunger of figuring out, what have I been missing this whole time with these children's books that have these huge lessons in them and so many different ones. They're so versatile. And it's not like you just have a book and it's a one-trick pony. There's so many things that can be taught from one book. And so that was a pivotal moment for me in realizing what a book, like the power of a book, what it can really do.
Very neat. I love Patricia Palacco and following her on social media and kind of seeing some of her drawings and just kind of behind the scenes of her writing also. And so that's kind of fun. One of my favorites of hers is Thunder Cake.
Oh, yes.
And so it's like, as a kid, that was like in fear of thunderstorms and that kind of thing. That was always a big one. And so I love those stories. They're dear to my heart too. Well, Rachel, what can we expect next from you?
Well, right now I am getting ready to start putting a lot more focus back into promoting this first book and getting the word out there to more people. Because in order for me to publish the rest, because I'm doing this all by myself, I'm self-publishing everything. And so in order for that to happen, I have to get this first one to be uber successful in order to get the rest out. So I'm putting a lot of effort into getting that promoted, but in the background, I'll be working on the manuscript more for book 2 about joy, so that as soon as this is gaining traction and I see that it's feasible to start production of the next one, I can get that rolling out and have that in little kids' hands as soon as possible. But this first one's gotta make some more improvements from what I've been doing. It's a lot harder than you think. I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, it is. It's one of those, there's definitely different parts of your brain between writing a book and marketing a book. And so that's definitely something you don't always think about when you tackle that self-publishing area.
Yeah, it wasn't even on my radar when I started it. Like, you know, it's kind of the rose-colored glasses? That's what it was like starting this whole process. And then as I got further into it, I started to realize what all was involved and how difficult it was going to be. But I've been called to do it, so I'll do it. And he's going to make some amazing things happen from it.
Most definitely. Now, where can people find out more about you and your books, Rachael?
Well, right now, the best place would be on Instagram at Rachael.Hartzell. So RACHAEL.HARTZELL. And hopefully later this year, I will have my website ready to release to the world. But right now, it's still in the editing process.
Thank goodness for the editing process.
Right.
Too fun. Well, I hope our listeners will definitely reach out to you on Instagram to find out more about what's going on with these garden scouts and what we can expect next. So excited for you and what you're doing.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us, Rachael. I loved having you here.
Yeah, absolutely, Valerie. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun.
My pleasure. And thank you for joining Rachael and me on this episode of the Bookworthy Podcast. Check the show notes for any books or links that we discussed, and let us know in the comments if you have a favorite type of bug or have an interesting bug story to share. I'd love to hear. Be sure to like and subscribe to discover more great books together. Happy reading.
I hope you enjoyed this Play It Again episode with Bookworthy Podcast. I look forward to sharing new episodes and books with you soon. Be sure to join us over on social media at Bookworthy_podcast so you can discover when new episodes are heading your way. Happy reading.